Well, there was a 3-day acclimatization period at Camp Evans and refresher training because you really had to get used to this 105-degree heat and sometimes even hotter than that. And after that, then ultimately I was assigned to the 1st Battalion, 5th Cavalry Regiment. So when I arrived at my battalion, I arrived with 3 other officers. And we were ushered into the battalion commander's bunker at 8 o'clock at night. And this guy was, Lieutenant Colonel, was dead on his feet. We went in alphabetical order. There were no A's, so I went in first. And he gave us a 2-minute pep talk. I haven't got a clue what he said. And afterwards he said, well, to the S1, where do we need these officers? We need 1 in A, 2 in B, and 1 in C. So he points at me and says, you go to A, 2 to B, 1 to C. I was the only officer to complete his tour. The other 3 officers were either killed or wounded. The life expectancy of a platoon leader at this point in time in Vietnam was 90 days. You were a target for snipers. They shot the guy in front of the radio operator, and then they shot the radio operator. So that was a pretty awesome situation. I had been in the Army for 1 year on that day, and I was promoted to first lieutenant. And I had never really had a platoon leader's responsibility. So my company commander, in his wisdom, and he was a very smart guy, he was a captain, said, we're just going to make you the mortar platoon leader for a little while. Get your chance to kind of get your feet on the ground, see what's going on. And after a couple of weeks, I started to take more of a leadership position and initiative on doing some things. Had a very exciting time ambushing gazelles with a mortar. And then he said, okay, you're ready. Take over the first platoon. And I think there were 3 reasons why I survived my tour. Number 1 was I sat down with my platoon sergeant and my squad leaders, and I said, you guys have had more experience at this than I, but I'm still in charge. However, if you see me doing something wrong, I want you to speak up and tell me. And they did, and that was very helpful. Their tour was a year in the field. My tour was 6 to 7 months, then a staff job. So the second thing I did was I tried very, very hard not to do stupid stuff. And that may sound silly, but it was real easy to do stupid stuff. For example, I had a fellow officer in the 82nd who was calling in a helicopter, landing a helicopter, and you had to give arm signals to the helicopter pilot because they couldn't see exactly where the skids were. And he did so by standing on a mound. And when the helicopter landed, the blades cut off his head. Stupid stuff. And then third was that I listened to my point man and my cover man. Those are the guys 75 meters, 50 to 75 meters out in front in a line formation. And our lives were in their hands. So if they called me forward, well, if there was a booby trap, they'd spot it or they'd hit it. If there was an ambush, they'd spot it or they'd get ambushed. Dangerous positions, the most dangerous positions. So if they called me forward and said, I just don't feel right about what's happening, where we're going. I don't hear any monkeys. I don't hear any birds. There's sometimes smells. So I would shoot artillery out in front of our position. I shot a lot of artillery. I shot so much artillery that the battery that supported us got to know my call sign, Foggy Day 16, and they put a budget on me of 25 rounds. That's all I could shoot, but that was enough. You put 25 rounds out in front of that gives you a lot of confidence about walking through the area. And a few times, this is a tactic called reconnaissance by fire. And a few times that turned out to be a very good thing. So that was kind of my introduction to my platoon. I served in I Corps in the northwest corner of I Corps, next to the Laotian border. 3 canopy jungle, mountainous terrain. So we humped the boonies. Average temperature was about 105. With the humidity, it was awful. It was just, we carried 2 gallons of water and go through it by 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Our mission was to prevent infiltration from across the Laotian border by the NVA. And there were it was a free fire zone, so there were no friendlies. If we encountered anyone, we just killed them right away. Didn't ask questions. There were no friendlies in the areas. There were no Montagnards, nothing. For the most part, we were following a lot of animal trails. And there was something called wait a minute vines. Wait a minute vines would hang you up. And you had to cut your way through with machetes. And it was brutal, brutal terrain for the most part. We wore the same uniforms for 4 to 6 weeks at a time. Got about 4 days, you got used to the smell. The longest I think I ever went was about 5 weeks. And they finally flew clean clothes out to us. And I got to the clean clothes pile late. So the only pair of pants that was left was a small, and I wore medium. So I had to put those on, and about the 3rd day I stepped over a log, and I ripped out the crotch. And of course in Vietnam it was too hot to wear underwear. So in my book, I call that chapter, Letting It All Hang Out.